title Trump-esque with the title of the meeting. The title just kind of took over, it kind of grew legs of its own, but we started talking about this meeting about a year ago and wanting to have you in a room to talk about the issues, the priorities, the things that the BRA are doing, and not focus on the budget. The budget meetings are coming. We'll talk a little bit more about the schedule and budget meetings that we'll have this summer, but we really wanted you to be able to come and hear our staff talk about water priorities, things that are going on down in Austin, things that are going on in Washington, D.C., real life things that could impact the water business, the cost of water. We wanted to spend some time talking about the priorities that we have in looking at aging infrastructure. One of the things that you're going to hear today is you may hear the word risk a lot, and we're really focused on evaluating the risk of the components, the infrastructure that we have. Remember the old commercial, pay me now or pay me later? We want to be out ahead of those types of decisions so that we can look at aging infrastructure and making sure that we're prioritizing the capital projects that we need to be prioritizing to make sure that we're doing the job right the first time, we're saving you money, and we're being very fiscally conservative on how we're moving forward with developing more water, protecting the infrastructure that we have, because at the end of the day, the ratepayers pay the rates for the decisions that we make. And we want to be transparent in that, and we want you to know what's going on at the Basin River Authority. I am fully aware of what today is. According to the radio, today is the most unproductive day in corporate America. And our goal is to get you to lunch so that you can begin checking just how bad your brackets are. And the games don't start for another hour, so you're going to be okay. Even at the Region G meeting yesterday, somehow we ended up talking about basketball brackets. And there's some of you in the room I had no clue that you were basketball fans. And A&M didn't make it. But neither did University of Texas. I don't even know if I guess Baylor made it, didn't they? Baylor made it? Yeah, well, I hope you don't have them in that bracket. So we have a lot to talk about today. Our goal is to be done about noon and then serve you lunch. We want it to be informal. We want you to ask questions. We've got a lot of our staff that's going to get up and present and again talk through some of our priorities. We have a lot of folks here today that I'd like to introduce. And so you'll know we have enough board members here today that we went ahead and posted the meeting, so it is a posted meeting for the Basin River Authority board members. So I'm going to spend a few minutes doing some introductions, and I've got to get my glasses on to do that. But there's some folks that I think it's important that you know that are here. First of all, our new board chairman, Cynthia Flores, is here. Cynthia, thanks for coming. Chris Adams, when I call your name, stand up, please. Chris Adams from our board of directors. Jim Lattimore is here from our board of directors. Rick Huber. Our new board member, Judy Crum, is here. Judy, thank you for coming. Our new board member, Royce Leslie, is here. Royce, thank you for coming. Sal Zaccanino is here, and his wife Alice. Thank you all for coming very much. Ford Taylor from the Waco area has been on our board for a couple of years. Thank you, Ford. Wes Lloyd is also from the Waco area. He's served on our board now for a couple of years. Thank you, Wes, for coming. Wayne Wilson is a new board member for the BRA. Wayne. And Peter Bennis is here also. Peter, thank you for coming. He's been on our board for a long time now. We appreciate your service, Peter. Also, McLennan County Judge Scott Felton is here. Scott, thanks for coming. We appreciate you being here. And then also Bernie County Judge James Oakley is here. James, thank you very much. And then also Bernie County Commissioner Billy Wall is here. We really appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know how busy commissioners and judges are, and appreciate you guys being here. So to kick off the meeting, where's Chuck? Come on up, Chuck. And we're going to introduce you to some risk management and talk about some capital projects that we have going on. Hurry. That's right.
All right, thank you. So as David said, my name is Chuck Wolf. I'm the Technical Services Manager for the BRA. And I've got two items on the agenda today to talk through with you. One is sort of an update on some of the capital projects we have, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we're going about planning for future capital improvements for the BRA going forward. So the way we've broken down the capital projects update is sort of things that are on the horizon, things that are about to happen, as well as some things that are underway, and then some other projects that we have that are nearing completion. Obviously, we have a pretty significant capital improvement plan. We don't want to keep you guys here all day long, but we're hitting some of the highlights of some of the projects that sort of hit the key facilities throughout the basin. So the first one I want to talk about on the horizon is we've got some minor structural improvements, miscellaneous improvements that we're doing up at Possum Kingdom at the Moore Shepherd Dam. So what we've got is we're going to build a new boat dock at the south end of the lake, so we can be a little bit quicker to deploy if there's needs or issues, and have boats on the water. So we're getting that design. And then we have a weir box, which you'll see here, that is actually within the dam. It measures water that flows through the dam. So concrete structures are not impervious, they do leak. We want to make sure that we know how much is going through the dam. And it's really important that we're able to measure that change in rate over time. So we'll talk about another project here. We're going to use that data as indicative data about potential other issues within the dam. So in order to do that, because the lake creates a lot of hydrogen sulfide, this has been attacked quite a bit over the years. So we've got to upgrade it and make it to where it can actually work as a measuring tool. And then the last one is we've got a box culvert that gets us access to the dam that we need to go ahead and do some updates to, so we can make sure to maintain access to the facility during operations. So not a major project, but one that hits on some critical elements of a pretty critical piece of infrastructure. Another project we have on the horizon, we've selected our engineer for this, but that was the same as the last one. We're in negotiation right now, hoping to bring something back to our April board meeting on this project, is the Bell and Stillhouse pipeline. So this is called the Bell House project. It's about a 6-mile pipeline that would connect Lake Belton to Lake Stillhouse Hollow. As part of a long-term water planning project, we need to be able to move water between the lakes in the 2025 timeframe. So that, from a capital projects perspective for a job of this magnitude, that's today. So we're starting on it so we can make sure that we have it ready as close to that 2025 date as possible. So this project is going to be launching into a really very detailed feasibility study, sort of a pre-engineering report, pre-design, so that we can get all the permitting and planning mobilized for the detailed design phase and know which options that we want to use going forward and keep the project on track. So it's an exciting project for us, it's a significant project for us, and something that we're looking forward to getting started here this summer. Another project that we kicked off in February is called the Castle Project, which is a concrete assessment and service life extension for the Moore Shepherd Dam, which creates Possum Kingdom Lake. So you'll see photos from the original construction of the dam, and then sort of where it is today in time. We kicked this off in February. As an engineer, it was probably one of the best days I've had at work in the last year, because we got to go crawl around the dam for the better part of the afternoon. And I will say that the dam, she's holding up pretty good for something that's 80 or so years. But it definitely needs a little TLC. And so over the next year, we're going to go through a detailed series of structural evaluations to be able to determine what exactly we should do to extend the life of the dam. And that's our primary objective, is to try to extend the life of the dam as long as we can. And then if we have to do other things, we'll be able to start getting recommendations out of that to do additional evaluations and engineering to use for this facility. So most concrete structures, we say about 100-year useful life. We want to try to get this one to go as far beyond that as we possibly can safely. Another significant project that we have underway is at Lake Limestone, and this is a replacement of the Tanner gates, or the radial gates you may have called as well, for Sterling C. Robinson Dam. And significant project requirement here too. This dam is 40 plus years old. The gates do have leakage that's going on with them. So this is a full and complete replacement of the gates themselves. We're going to be looking at the hoist mechanisms as well to make sure that they're able to handle the additional weight of the steel. We'll put in new hoists. So we should, at the end of this process, have new gates for this dam. So give you a little perspective, each one of those radial gates is about 40 feet wide. So it's a pretty significant structure in and of itself. So we just completed 30% design on that. The engineers gave us their 30% submissions. We're reviewing that right now and should be able to move that into the next phase of detailed design this month. Another project we have going on right now is something to help us extend our water portfolio. So we are making use of the Trinity aquifer for additional groundwater supplement in the East Williamson County area. So we have a water treatment plant in East Williamson County that treats Lake Ranger surface water. This well is capable of producing about 3,000 acre-feet a year of water. The water definitely has a different quality than Lake Ranger water, so we're going through an analysis right now. We're going to finish up the well so we can pump the well, we can know what water's coming out of it for sure. But then we're going to do an analysis of the water and make sure we know what kind of blending rate we need to have, and we maintain stability of the water for the distribution system that it goes into. This is a great opportunity for us to augment some of our water supply. Something we like to continue to look at is innovative opportunities down the road too. So we should start testing with this well this month. Another project that we've been working on, this is probably more of an operational project, but we have an incredible group of staff at Basin Kingdom that are great welders, they're great contractors, they're great builders, and they basically keep the Moore Shepherd Dam going. And so we've got these two valves, they're called rain jet valves. They give us the ability to discharge at lower flow rates than if we drop one of the gates. So these are about 2,000 to 3,000 CFS. If we drop a gate, we go immediately to 9,000 CFS. So these have been problematic, to say the least, for a long time. Our team up there basically rebuilt them in place. Got very creative about how they did things, and they got a 78-inch operational a couple months ago, right, Mike? And they're actually working on the 42-inch right now. This week they're working on that to get it operational. So if you're up in the area when these are discharging, it's pretty awesome to watch because they shoot a very large jet of water out into the river downstream. But so this is a great accomplishment, something that we want to make sure we noted that the team up there is doing incredible work. So keeping a very old structure running for us. So any questions on the capital projects that you may want to ask that I may be able to answer or someone else may be able to?
I do want to make sure you understand, if you just read Texas Monthly, there's an article about the controversies over the Trinity groundwater. The Trinity well is a very unique body of water. And if you're west of I-35, it's a very shallow aquifer. It has very different characteristics than where we are looking at building groundwater wells in far east Williamson County. The wells that they're talking about in Texas Monthly are less than 1,000 feet deep. Our well is about 3,200 feet deep, so we're real deep. And before we dug that well, we had extensive research done. We actually dug a test well, and we hired groundwater experts to come in and prove through science that that well would produce and not have impacts on those wells on the west side of I-35. So we're real excited about continuing to develop that well field. We think that well field will provide up to 15,000 acre-feet of water over time to allow us to bridge the gap to better understand the future of the Carrizo, or to permit Allen's Creek so that we can bring Lake Somerville water or other water supplies to the west. So we see it as a real affordable bridge gap to bring in water to Williamson County and ultimately Bell County. So we're very excited about that project. Any questions for Chuck or on any of the projects that you've seen so far? Don't be bashful. Okay, and I also want to introduce our past board chairman, Dave Scott, walked in a few minutes ago. Dave's been a friend of the BRA and has served for many years on the BRA board, so thanks for coming, Dave. We appreciate you being here.
Okay, so I'll move into some more wonky type stuff next. So the only way to describe this. So David mentioned that we're going to talk a lot about risk and other things, and there's lots of ways to look at risk. One of the ways we like to look at risk is how it can help us plan and be more effective in our planning. So in September of last year, a group of staff from the BRA got together, we built a steering team to start looking at how operationally and capitally we can use risk to help us improve our planning as an organization. So the group has sort of two functions or two objectives with this work. The first one is to be able to use risk to help us prioritize decision-making on asset renewal. So as we use our assets, as we operate assets, they have to be renewed, they have to be rehabilitated, and eventually they just have to be replaced. We want to make sure that we do that as effectively as possible. We don't run things into the ground we shouldn't run into the ground, and we don't replace things too early that shouldn't be replaced too early. The other side of this, though, is our finance team said, look, we need better data long-term to do 50-year planning about when we have to renew certain assets. So if you remember, I mentioned that we're replacing the gates at Lake Limestone right now. They're about 40-something years old. Well, so the replacement of that will be within our 50-year window. So how do we have a structured approach for making sure that we've got those long-term investments properly programmed and we know what the impacts of them are going to be? So those are the two objectives we have with this process. If you've been involved with industrial asset management processes, some of this stuff we're probably pretty familiar to. So the process in general is we're going to work on assessing our assets. We're going to look at their condition as well as their criticality. So how critical is a particular asset, let's say a pump or a gate, to the operation of our system. Then we're going to build two sort of different priorities or profiles. One will be our relative risk by asset. So how are assets aging? How are they not aging? And we also look at the overall profile of risk presented by our assets to the BRA. And from that, we can use that information to prioritize asset renewal so we can lower our overall risk profile. And I'll show you in a couple of slides sort of what it's going to look like. And then from that, we can also use for long-term capital forecasting how to manage all our assets. So the way we do this is we actually have different measures. One of the measures is likelihood of failure. So this, if you think about this as the probability, I don't like to use flood recurrence probabilities because we all know that those data don't matter anymore. But if you think about what's the chance of, at your own home, what's the chance of you having a fire? There's a likelihood of something like that happening. So we have the ability with good engineering review and science to be able to assess the likelihood that something may fail. And so that's the first piece of this, that's the probability, and then start hitting the button. And then we also want to look at the consequence if that were to fail. And then because we don't typically build things without an extra unit, we'll include redundancy because that is in fact an implied reduction of risk. So if we need 3 pumps, but we have 4 pumps, then we can account for that. And what it does is it gives us a risk score, and then that risk score can sort of give us a profile of where our assets are. So you can look at this and you would see, you would see different dots in different areas. Obviously, if they're in red, that's not good. If they're in green, it is good. It's okay. We actually did some of this back in 2011 when we were looking at some bond renewals and some bond items. And so for some of our facilities, we actually have a initial shot at this, and you'll see on a score of 25, I think the max this gets is like 12.5. So East Williamson County, most of our assets were in pretty good shape. But if we were going to spend money on assets at East Williamson County in this case, we probably would want to spend them on the chemical handling. And in fact, that's what the staff did, is that they improved the chemical handling systems and they were able to help us with that risk profile. So when I mentioned how we want to lower the profile, this is the kind of data we can use that will help us improve that. A part of this that becomes a challenge is how you convert that data into something you can use. So we're going to have some different risk scores that are different business rules that will help us move that data into how we set our capital improvement plans. So we'll use the risk score itself, we'll use the condition score, and then we'll use the rated useful life. And if you're really interested in it, I'd be happy to give you guys my hour-and-a-half lecture on this slide at some point in the future. From that information, though, we can get different buckets of categories of spend, and then we can, of course, plot that information out, and then we can decide what we want to do with it. So this is actually a real example I had from a prior life. And the first thing that we saw when we saw this data was, wow, is there some way we could move that here a little bit, or move some of this back here? And in fact, we made strategic business decisions to stop from the peak and valley effect hitting us. So what are we going to do next? So over the remainder of this fiscal year, we're working to establish our hierarchy of our assets. This only works if you sort of have your assets structured so that you can apply these factors to them correctly. We're going to map that into our N4 financial database. The work is pretty much already done. We'll perform a gap analysis on our assets, make sure that we aren't missing assets that for this purpose we need, that we have captured in other places. And then make an initial assignment of those criticality data, so how important is something to us. And then next year we'll work on the condition assessment data, and we'll finalize the criticality, and we'll start using this information to help us drive capital planning decisions. So it's a really exciting process. Like I said, it's a little bit wonky, but this is a really positive use of risk. We often think about risk only in the liability term. This is really using it to help us make really smart decisions, and we'll hopefully we'll do that going forward. So if there are questions, I can take them, otherwise I'll get back to David.
So this is a real 30,000 foot view of the risk analysis that we're starting to do. And what's critical here is this allows us to justify why we're spending what money and when we're spending it to our board of directors and to our customers. So when Chuck shows you and talks about all of the analysis that's going into this, we're actually looking at hundreds, if not almost 1,000 pieces of equipment at all of our facilities to understand how they play into this role. So there's a lot of development that's happening. So as you're having projects develop and you're trying to incorporate this into your system, you have resource issues that you have to balance. But I'm really, really excited that we're moving in this direction because it will help us be more accountable to you. It'll help us be more accountable to our board. It'll help us make sure that we don't get to failure on pumps or parts, that we can foresee in the future how to spend our money the best way that we possibly can. So thank you, Chuck. I'll tell you a little story. My first meeting that I attended as general manager of the Brazos River Authority, I was so nervous that I actually introduced board members by the wrong name. And I had it written down. So you'll understand when I tell you that when I folded this piece of paper, that on the other side of it was one of our new board members that didn't get introduced. So Mr. Sanderson, Alan Sanderson is a new board member for the Brazos River Authority, and we appreciate him being here. He's from Sugar Land, and at least when I introduced you, I got your name right. Now we're going to let Aaron Abel, most of you know Aaron, he's our water services manager, talk a little bit about water supply and drought contingency.
How's everybody doing today? So under water supply, we wanted to bring a couple of items to you guys to update. One is a system operation permit and long-term contracting under the permit. We'll provide some background of how we got to where we are right now with the permit. We kicked off the project for system operations back in 2003, so there's been a lot of things that have happened. Also, we'll provide the next steps as what we're going to do now that we have the permit and long-term contracts going forward. So we'll give you some information about that. And then finally, we'll talk about our drought contingency plan update. It's what the drought contingency plan is and how we're going to update it and some of those changes. So we'll go ahead and get started. This is kind of cut off a little bit. Looks like this slide here. This is a schematic. First, I wanted to talk about the VRA water supply system. So, as most folks know, we have a system of reservoirs. There are 11 reservoirs, and 8 of them are not ours, that are not VRA owned. And we have 3 along the main stem, and then we have 8 others that are on the tributaries. So the water supply system of the River Authority is large. You can go from here 4 hours north, and you're still around PK. Or you could go drive downstream all the way to Freeport, and that's another 4 hours. So it's a large area. We have a parallel system of reservoirs. And we have a large area downstream of the reservoirs that contribute to flows. So back in 1964, the Texas Water Rights Commission approved one of our older water rights called System Order, and they recognized the fact that if you had coordinated releases, you can generate additional efficiencies of the system. And you can see here how large the system is. We could be in a drought like we were in 2011 and 2015. And the main stem system has some issues as far as water supply being low. But in the Little River system, we could have higher storage amounts. So you can actually coordinate releases to gain efficiencies. And in the 1950s, you have a flip-flop, and the Little River system was more impacted than the main stem. So the actual coordinated releases of our system of reservoirs can gain efficiencies. And that was recognized back in 1964. But fast forward to 1997, there was no way to determine the benefits of system operation until 1997 when Senate Bill 1 was passed that authorized funding for the water availability models. It authorized the regional water plan. So taking the water availability models, we developed the system operation project, and that was initiated back in April 2003. And I won't go through all these different steps that we've gone over the last 16 years, but it was a pretty long process. But the big thing is we didn't have to construct anything. That's one of the big things that the merits of the system operation permit. We finally received the issuance of the permit in November of 2016, and in that permit there was a drought study that had to be conducted to analyze the last drought from 2011 to 2015 to determine if there were any impacts to the system operation permit. And that was completed in August of 2017. Results of that study indicated no impacts to the system operation permit. And then finally, in April of 2018, we updated the water management plan that was required for the permit to conform with the actual permit that was issued in 2016. So that's a little bit of the background. Jim Forte probably could have, he's run through this several times over the last 16 years or so, but we wanted to give you a background of the permit. So the basic elements of the permit, it authorizes 334,000, about 334,000 acre feet of non-firm water, and that's paper water. So that's not a firm amount. The firm supply is dependent upon some modeling that we've been doing for the last 14 or 15 months, and we'll talk about that here shortly. But the permit itself, it authorizes a couple things: use of recurrent flows and unappropriated run-river flows downstream of our reservoirs. We have gone through the water budget. We call it the water budget tool. It essentially takes the authorization of the permit and allows us to operate our system to determine where we can make contracts throughout the basin. So we're putting contracts where they are intended to be all up and down the basin and determine an amount. And that has aided us into doing that. And we're going to go to the board next month, at the end of April, to make a presentation of these new long-term contracts under the permit. We expect to execute those contracts in the summertime for the FY 2020 budget. I did want to point out that we are currently operating under the water management plan and the accounting plan, which is for most of the finance folks, you got to count your dollars, you got to count your water too, and that's required by TCQ, and we've been doing that since April of 2018. So we'll change gears here now. Talk a little bit about our drought contingency plan update. So what is a drought contingency plan? I guess that's probably some folks are wondering what that is. A lot of municipalities know what that is because you have to have your own plan, are required by TCQ. But essentially, we have to have a plan that as we enter drought, how do we make that supply last as long as possible? So stages, and we can increase the measures as we get further along in a drought. But that's required by Texas Administrative Codes, or TCQ, to have 5-year updates to the plan. The plan is due May 1st of 2019. It'll be submitted to TCQ. We do coordinate through the regional water planning process in the updates. So the process, and we'll get into details of what changes we're going to have, but I wanted to bring this up. We do have a 30-day public comment period that begins tomorrow, actually, March 22nd. We'll have our draft posted to our BRA website at this location. We did send out letters earlier this week notifying of the process, and so you should either have already received that or should be getting that. We did post this, the notice of the update. We got the Texas Register through the Secretary of State's office. We will address comments, and we're going to present the DCP update to the board for approval at the end of April, and then we'll submit the final plan. So what are some of the proposed changes? So we're going to we proposed several different things in this update of the plan. We are going to establish new trigger levels and some minor changes to the trigger levels, and I'll talk about that later. We incorporated the East Williamson County Regional Water System into the DCP. We have a water treatment system at Lake Granger that treats water out of Lake Granger, and so we incorporated that into this plan. And we referenced a seasonal forecast from the Texas Water Development Board as a drought monitoring tool. We worked with the Texas Water Development Board for the past several years in the seasonal forecast, and that they have won some, I should say, that they've gained some recognition from the National Weather Service on their forecasts. We'll talk a little bit about that. But it is a good early drought warning tool to monitor as we get into the spring months. And then we clarified some pro-rata curtailment language in the plan as well. So our trigger levels. These trigger levels we have four trigger levels for each stage in our drought contingency plan. Drought watch, drought warning, emergency, and curtailment. So those have remained the same. We didn't add any stages to the drought contingency plan at all. As we enter different stages of drought, that's when we recommend it. Y'all receive notifications and letters, and we post it to the media as far as what our recommended use or recommended water use reduction will be in these different drought stages. And so the plan is consistent with the previous plan as far as those recommendations. A little bit about the trigger level. So as we enter these different stages of drought, we look at the lake levels at the individual reservoirs or the total storage, combined storage, and subsystems. So here, I don't know if the colors are kind of washed out in this, but we compare the current, what's in the current plan, the triggers, to the proposed. And you'll see these several that are in bold blue. Those are the areas for the levels that did not change. And you'll see minor modifications to the trigger levels in the other levels of the drought stage. So I talked a little bit about incorporation of the East Williamson County Regional Water System. We did incorporate criteria specific to that plan based on initiation and termination of different drought stages. The triggers for the initiation is based on consumption and production capacity in that specific plan. So going forward, we will maintain one plan that will be integrated into this overall drought contingency plan that we're delivering. Texas Water Development Board seasonal forecast. This is something that I mentioned before, that we work with the board mainly on data sharing, but the board got a grant funded through, I think, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation to develop a forecast to determine what the likelihood of either above or below normal rainfall would be in May, June, July. As everybody knows, if we get to April and May and we haven't had any rain, you know, we're probably in a drought or about to be in a drought. So it's critical that this area or that time frame to know what's going on. As I mentioned before, the board has mentioned or has attended some meetings, and they gained some recognition from the National Weather Service and how they predict or forecast the May, June, July rainfall. What they do is that they take the atmospheric stability and atmospheric circulations in January through April to forecast what they think is going to happen in May through July. And so they're also working on, in the future, I think they're going to be working on other rainfall forecasts for other parts of the year that would help us in determining what's the drought going to look like, or if there's a possibility for a drought. It's issued every 2 weeks from January through the end of April. If you go to this website, you'll find that it's a county by county forecast, but we wanted to cite that in DCP as information that, you know, it's a tool that you can monitor for the likelihood of possible drought coming up. So I think that's all I have.
Go back to your slides. A couple of things. If you need help with your DCPs, let us know. We'll come sit down with you. All of this stuff is going to be posted on our webpage. We'll also be talking about DCPs this summer at the special meeting. But I want to drive home a point. For those of you that were looking at this number, Aaron, in 30 words or less, give a definition of firm water.
So 30 words.
33 words.
So looking at the water availability models, don't count them. You're modeling evaporation, inflows, water use through the worst drought on record on a month-to-month basis. That minimum amount of water that you can achieve through that drought of record is firm yield.
That's close enough. Firm yield is all we will contract for on a long-term basis, because we don't want to overcommit water and customers go pour concrete and start building infrastructure, and then we figure out that water's not firm. So when we contract with you all for long-term water supply, 30 years or beyond, it's firm yield. The firm yield out of SysOps is nowhere near 334,000 acre feet. And that's what this model that these guys are working on, these folks are working on. It will firm up, it will shore up that firm water amount. It's going to be somewhere closer to 100,000 acre feet of water, correct? So that's what we're looking at. We're being very cautious, again, because the last thing we want to do is make water available that we figure out is not available. So, Tiffany Morgan's going to come up now and talk a little bit about some of our really challenging things that we're dealing with as far as trying to both protect the environment and protect our water supply.
For those of you who've attended meetings for the last couple of years, you've heard me.
Sorry. No, you're going the wrong way.
You've heard me talk about a concern we've had for freshwater mussels in our basin. basin, you can see it pretty much covers everything in our basin. And given the fact that the Endangered Species Act is probably the single most powerful piece of legislation in the nation, and it has disrupted state water rights systems in other states, we have taken this extremely serious. Fortunately, we do have a little good news on this front. The false flag and the fawn split, as U.S. Fish and Wildlife has worked through their evaluation process, those are probably truly on the path to being endangered. I would fully expect that to be their recommendation this fall. There are very small populations. They are isolated to just a few river basins in Texas, and they basically check all the boxes. Fortunately, the smooth pimpleback, which is the one that covers the most of our basin, as they have done more research, and A&M collaborated with a bunch of other universities across the nation, started doing genetic work on these, and discovered that our mussel is the same as the mussel in the Colorado Basin called the golden orb. They are both the same as mussels in Mississippi, Alabama, all of the Mississippi Basin. So different naming techniques way back when led to this problem. So these are probably going to, they have indicated to me, although they have not published yet, that their recommendation on these is that they be removed from the concern list, removed from the candidate list, and no longer considered, because they do cover multiple states with multiple water systems. So that will help quite a bit, but it's kind of all we needed was one to have an impact on our basin and our water management system, and we still have two under consideration. So we looked at what can we do to try to get out ahead of the issue. And U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service offers a voluntary, what they call pre-listing permit, called a candidate conservation agreement with assurances. And we made the decision last year to proceed with trying to negotiate one of those with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And since September have been locked in a room, and a whole lot of my time has been spent solely on this issue, almost all my time, negotiating back and forth with Fish and Wildlife Service. And the benefits of this agreement will be, it'll give us security in our water supply. So that if they are listed as endangered, we have already committed to perform conservation actions that will be beneficial to the mussels, but have protected our ability to continue to operate. We've tried to incorporate the ability to expand our water supply as long as we are meeting all the other conservation goals in the plan. And that once we get into that, if we do get in a severe drought that is uncontrollable and mussels do die, we are protected from incidental take enforcement under the Endangered Species Act. And when they do list them as endangered, because we're doing this pre-listing and committing to do conservation regardless, they cannot come back and make new demands on us after the listing agreement. So this is the time when we have the slightest shred of advantage that we have in the negotiating. And once they're listed, we are at their mercy. So we decided to move forward. We were the first river authority that stepped out on that path. And now, as of just a few weeks ago, the other three river authorities are all now working towards this path too. And the biggest risk, which I already said, is that they can come in California. They have dramatically impeded their state water rights systems. The tunes in some areas they have through court order disrupted the system to the tune of 800,000 acres that they can no longer be diverted for municipal, agricultural, or industrial use. That's more than our current total permitted amount of water, so it can be quite dramatic, and they do have the authority. And I can only think of one or two cases where the Endangered Species Act and Fish and Wildlife has not won a court challenge. It is just that strong of legislation. So where we are right now is we have submitted and to the Fish and Wildlife field offices. We have 3 field offices that cover our basin, our proposed CCA agreement. We have received comments back on them. I was pleasantly surprised. Few issues to work through, but nothing totally unreasonable or that far out of line. They seem very receptive to our comments back. I hope to have a revised draft back to their field offices hopefully by the end of the month. And then if they approve, we can submit it to the regional office for approval in Albuquerque. So hopefully by the time we meet again, I'll be telling you we have a done deal and a permit, and that our water supply is protected for y'all's benefit for the future. Any questions?
understand the significance of U.S. Fish and Wildlife coming to us saying, okay, you have a small amount of water in Lake Georgetown, and now every time river flows get so small, you're going to have to start releasing water. So this has been on our radar. Tiffany's group has done an outstanding job of making sure that U.S. Fish and Wildlife understands our concerns. And really, and you've heard me say this before if you've been to our meetings, we are very pro environmental protection, but we need to do so on the back of science. And this will also allow time for science to be collected to better understand how the impacts of what's going on upstream will impact the mussels. So Brad Brunette, our Central Basin, Lower Basin manager, is going to talk about a whole broad spectrum.
Hopefully not too broad, because lunch is coming up here pretty quick. I've got 4 projects I want to update you guys on. And if you've been to our customer meetings in the past, you've probably heard us talk about these. If not, I'll give you an update on them today. You'll learn a little bit about what we're talking about. First off, we've been working on a couple of reallocation studies with the Corps of Engineers over the last probably 10 to 15 years in total. We've got one of those that's at the tail end of the process, and another one that's just getting toward the start. Lake Aquila is one that we've been working on for quite a while, and it's at the tail end, and Lake Whitney is one that we're getting ready to start on. And I'll talk a little more specifically about them on the next couple of slides, but when we say reallocation, we're basically talking about how to use the different storage zones in those reservoirs differently in the future than we have in the past. And when I say differently, I'm mainly talking about getting more of a water supply benefit out of them. Most of the Corps of Engineers reservoirs, you saw the map earlier, in fact, all of them have a very large flood pool where when we have a lot of wet rain and runoff like we've had the last several years, the Corps of Engineers captures and holds that water in those flood pools until it's safe to release it downstream. Those flood pools serve a very important purpose of minimizing flooding downstream, but on the flip side of that, the area below the flood pool and the normal pool, or what they call a conservation pool, is for water supply. And as we all know, our populations are increasing in Texas and our water needs are increasing. And so what we're basically looking at is seeing if we can take a little bit of that storage, at least at Lake Aquila, that's been reserved for flood storage in the past, and use it for water supply. So this is a schematic of what Lake Aquila really looks like if you're looking at the different zones there. Down in the bottom part of the pool there is a conservation pool. And if you look up above the black box where it says elevation 537.5, everything above that is the flood pool. And so there's about 82,000 acre feet of storage that's normally reserved for flood storage in that flood pool, and we have about 43,000 acre feet of water supply. So we started working with the Corps about 10 years ago to look at reallocating a portion of that flood storage down to water supply. And you can see there that what came out of that study was we looked at a number of about 15,000 acre feet of additional water that you see there in that hashed area between elevation 537.5 and 542. So that was kind of the recommendation coming out of that study, that we would increase the pool level there at Aquila, the normal water level, by about 4.5 feet and add some water supply to our system. We completed that study about a year ago, and it was primarily funded 50/50 by the BRA and by the Corps of Engineers. The Corps of Engineers staff did most of the work, and we helped fund that. We've been in the Corps of Engineers approval process for the last year or two, and so they have a fairly meticulous process for getting these things authorized. It starts at the district office level, then goes to their division, and ultimately up to headquarters, and then finally to the Assistant Secretary of the Army. And unfortunately, with this project, we heard about 2 weeks ago that the Assistant Secretary of the Army for the Corps has denied authorizing this project to move forward. We heard that verbally from the Corps of Engineers, my friends at the Fort Worth District Office, but we haven't received the official written confirmation of that. So we're expecting to know a little bit more about what that means and what options there are to move forward here shortly. And, in the Assistant Secretary's defense, obviously, water supply is important, and we're supportive of this project and wanted the ability to implement this in the future if we need to. But with all the flooding that we've had in Texas over the last few years and across the nation, it's our understanding that the new Assistant Secretary that's been in place maybe a year or so is just really risk averse to giving up any flood storage right now, just because of all the flood problems that we've seen. And, if any of you have been, all of us, I guess, are living in Texas, especially those down around coast, we've had some major floods. So we're gonna have to kind of stay tuned on this one to see how it plays out. But the last news that we got was not good in terms of a path forward. Lake Whitney. We're at the very beginning of the process on Lake Whitney, and here we're looking at something a little bit different. Lake Aquila, we're actually talking about taking some of that flood pool and reallocating it to water supply. Lake Whitney is the largest reservoir in our basin. It has the largest flood pool. It's a tremendous volume there that they reserve for flood storage. It's over 1.3 billion acre-feet of water. We probably should have mentioned what an acre-foot was earlier, but for anyone that may not know, it's about a football field covered in 1 foot of water. That's 1 acre-foot. So a tremendous amount of flood storage in Lake Whitney that protects the lower Brazos from flooding. At Lake Whitney, one of the things that's a little different though is that there's also a hydropower pool in the conservation zone there. So if you look at that conservation pool, about 22% of that volume, which is 233,000 acre-feet, is BRA, and the other 78% is the Southwest Power Administration, which is a federal agency that regulates hydropower production. And so if you look below that, below elevation 520, it's what's referred to as the power head pool. And so at Lake Whitney, what we're really looking at is changing the way that hydropower and that power head pool may be used more forward in the future. So we're optimistic that we might have a little bit better success because we're not taking flood storage, or that's not our intent. But the negative side, Southwest Power Administration traditionally hasn't been a big fan of reallocation projects because typically there may be a little bit of generation capacity that's given up for water supply. So it's something that we're going to have to work through with them. And this is not new. It's a process that has gone on at other lakes across the country where it will be a kind of a negotiated process. We'll have to bring all the parties to the table to take a look at it. Those of you, many of you out here are customers of ours that are in the power industry, and y'all know better than we do about the changes in the power market over the last 10 to 15 years. Life is a lot different today in the power industry than it was historically. And this storage allocation in Lake Whitney hasn't been reviewed since the 1970s. So we think now is the right time to do that. Lake Whitney is a large reservoir, so when we're talking about the amount of water supply that can be made available from reallocation, we're talking in the tens of thousands of acre-feet. The preliminary studies that have been looked at range from anywhere from about 20,000 acre-feet per year of additional firm water supply up to 70,000. It kind of depends on what the ultimate reallocation looks like. How much of that water do we actually change over to water supply? So we're at the beginning of the process for this. We've been requesting authorization from Congress and the Corps of Engineers to start for about the last 6 years. Unfortunately, there hasn't been any funding for it, and we haven't received any congressional action. And so about a year ago, the Corps of Engineers helped us find a way to move forward on our own. So it's called using contributed funds, which basically means that BRA is going to pay for the study. But even that has to be approved by the Corps of Engineers. And so where we are now is we've got a contributed funds study package that's been prepared by the Fort Worth District Office on our behalf, and they submitted that up the chain to the Corps of Engineers headquarters. And so we're waiting on approval from headquarters that will allow us to officially scope out and start this study. So it's going to be a multi-year process, and hopefully at the end of it, we'll have some additional water supply, and we'll be able to make peace with the power company and compensate them for any water and storage that they have to give up. Allen's Creek Reservoir. This is another one. If you've been to our customer meetings, y'all have heard us talk about this every year, probably as long as we've been having customer meetings. And so just kind of update some. There we go. They told me not to touch it on the bottom, and I did. So this is the proposed reservoir in the lower Brazos Basin. It would be built just off of the Brazos River, and it's a unique reservoir in that it's not going to dam up the Brazos River or any major tributary. It's going to be built right off the river, and will actually pump water from the Brazos River into the reservoir when flows are high or normal in the lower Brazos, and then we'll have that water sitting in the reservoir for when we have droughts to be able to provide to our customers in the lower Brazos Basin. So it's called a scalping operation. We'll be pumping that water from the river into the reservoir. The water right permit for this project is already in place, so we have that. We also have all of the land secured. 99% of the land is owned by the Brazos River Authority and our project partner, the City of Houston. The legislature kind of created the current ownership arrangement 20 years ago or so, and the city of Houston owns essentially 70% of this reservoir when it's built, and the VRA owns 30%. So that means they pay for 70% of it, get 70% of the water, we pay for the other 30% of the water. The problem has been that in our basin, we needed this reservoir really yesterday. We're already behind in our mind, and we're trying to move it forward. The city of Houston has adequate water supplies for a long time in the future, and it's debatable whether they need any of this water at all. And so we haven't been able to reach a good negotiated settlement with them to be able to either move forward under the current arrangement or else essentially buy them out of the project. Some of you that may have been following the legislative process this cycle probably know or have seen that there was a bill filed that would essentially require Houston to sell their interest in the project to the Brazos River Authority, so we would compensate them for their part of the project, their investments that they've made today, and we would be able to move forward with it. Matt and David may talk here more after I finish up here in the Q&A session with more detail on that, but really don't know how that legislation will ultimately play out, but we're hopeful that if the bill doesn't pass, at least it will be enough to force something to change, force some, maybe a little different negotiating posture from the city of Houston where we can move forward, because we need this reservoir, our customers in the lower Brazos need it, and it's not going to be quick. We've got probably 5 to 10 years of 404 permitting to do with the Corps of Engineers. We still have to do the engineering design and then construct it. So if we're being honest with ourselves in terms of a time frame, we're probably looking at 10 to 15 years before we can get this thing online, and we need it as quick as we can. And price-wise, it's about half a billion dollars. $500 million is our estimate for the project from where we are now to getting it completed. The last thing I've got here is the Lower Brazos Flood Protection Planning Study. This is an effort we began back in 2014, actually at the tail end of the drought. I remember when we were talking about getting the study going, there were comments made about whether we really should be doing this, do we need to do this, because at that time nobody knew if it was ever going to rain again, much less flood. But lo and behold, we started, and here we are 5 years later, we've had historic flooding in this part of the basin. So the purpose of the study was really to update and develop consistent floodplain information from about Hempstead down to the coast. So that's about 200 miles of river down there, where we either had no floodplain information or very outdated information, or disjointed information from one county to the next. And so we were looking to update that entire stretch of river so that we've got new, updated, consolidated data and floodplain information. VRA kind of coordinated that study. We had a number of partners in the Lower Brazos Basin, and some of them are probably here today that helped fund it. And we also received grant funding from the Texas Water Development Board. So it was a really a collaborative effort that's really turned out to be, in my opinion, kind of a showcase for what regional floodplain planning should look like in Texas. And another topic of the legislature this session right now, there's a lot of focus on flooding, and there's probably going to be some bills that ultimately come out of the legislative session that get passed that will put a little bit more responsibility on the state of Texas in general and on river authorities for being more involved in coordinating floodplain planning efforts like this. We've got some great new models out of this study. We've got new maps. And actually, as the study was going on, we were able to use some of the maps before the study was even complete in the emergency response for flooding in 2016 and 17 Hurricane Harvey. So it was very helpful before it was even completed, and now that it's complete, we'll have a standard to work from going forward. And the entities that have been working with us that help fund it are all interested in keeping this effort going, even though we're at the end of the study and the study is complete. Just like with anything else, we've got models and data that if you put them on the shelf and don't look at them, don't use them, don't update them, 20 years from now we'll be right back where we were. So the goal is to try to create a coalition of folks in the Lower Brazos that will be involved and interested in helping keep this product fresh, keeping it up to date, and perhaps using it for ideas and ways to help prevent flooding, manage growth in the Lower Brazos that we haven't even contemplated at this point. I think that's the last slide I have. I think we're actually through with all our slides now, so we're open for questions on anything that we've talked about today or anything that we haven't talked about that you want to talk about.
So the significance of this type of event rolled into our system rate is important. because we want to make sure as owners of reservoirs that we have a role in helping control downstream flooding so that we don't have legislation in the future dictating how we have to operate our reservoirs with something other than water supply. So with that, I'm going to have Matt Phillips come up and talk a little bit more about where we are on Allen's Creek from the legislative perspective. And then also, some of you we visited with months ago going into the legislative session about a lot of concerns that we had with some flood type legislation that was being drafted. He'll give you just a flare on where we are with that too, Matt.
So yeah, I'll talk a little bit more. You know, a lot of you attended our customer meetings, I mean, not our customer meetings, but our board meetings, which we'll have one at the end of April, where you watch on the YouTube live feed. And at the April meeting, I'll give a much more in-depth legislative update that gets into a lot of the different bills that are moving, a bunch of the different subjects. So I won't go into that level of detail today. What I will say is the legislature, as it relates to water, is spending a lot of time on flooding, which we all expected coming out of Hurricane Harvey. It was kind of funny at the beginning of session before the filing deadline, it almost seemed as if every member of the legislature, no matter where they were from, had a flood-related bill. I mean, they were getting filed left and right. Some of them were good, some of them were not so good. But we're now to the point where a handful of those bills have kind of risen to the top. There's about 4 of them. The Senate passed 3 of them yesterday, and the House passed 1 of them out of committee on Monday. And essentially what they all do is, in addition to providing funding for things such as mapping and planning, which is something I think the legislature is going to put a big emphasis on, they look at creating a statewide flood planning process similar to the regional water planning process, which I know a lot of folks are familiar with, when you break the state up into individual watersheds and basins and look at flood projects in those. They also look at creating a flood infrastructure fund, which would fund projects that come out of that plan, in addition to funding recovery from Hurricane Harvey. So essentially fixing what's broken, and then looking at ways to build projects that would mitigate funding or flooding in the future. And then they also look at disaster preparedness. How do you train local officials to be better prepared for a disaster? How do you deal with things like debris removal? Debris removal was something we were very concerned about going into the legislative session because we were worried, given the amount of river stretch that we have, that we would be given the responsibility of removing debris out of every stretch of the Brazos River and all its tributaries. That sounds expensive, and it sounds like something that we probably don't have the manpower or the authority to really do. Luckily, none of that has come out of any of this stuff. It's really been more to study the issue, figure out ways to provide local entities with funding from the state to be able to remove debris, so that's a good thing. What we also haven't seen come out of the flooding discussion is, as David mentioned, changes to reservoir operations. We were really, really concerned about that going into the session, and that would be bills filed requiring us to do things like pre-release water from our reservoirs in advance of weather forecasts or hurricanes, so we would just artificially lower the lakes and potentially either lose all that water supply if the rain didn't come, or potentially make flooding worse if the rain happened below the reservoir instead of upstream. And so luckily none of that's happening. It all seems to be moving on a relatively good track, at least for now. In terms of where we are in the session, we're a little over halfway through, and that's the good news. The bad news is the second half is always worse than the first half. So I wish I had a good story for people. We're through the easy part, and the hard part's left to start. As it relates to the Allen's Creek bill, so that's House Bill 2846. It was filed by Chairman Lyle Larson, who's chair of the House Natural Resources Committee. As Brad said, we've grown tired of constantly telling you all that we're working with Houston to get Allen's Creek moving forward. And it's not that we haven't been working with them, we have, but they're just not interested. And for Houston, it's really a good news story for them. The reason they're not interested is they have taken care of their water supply future by going to the Trinity Basin, and that's great. That's awesome for them. But what that means is they don't need this project, and they certainly don't need to spend upwards of $300 million to construct a water supply project that they don't need. So that's what we've been attempting to convince them of is, look, let us take this on for you. Let us buy you out. Let us build it. We can reserve some water for you in the future, a smaller portion of water in the reservoir that you can then buy from us. And we were making progress with that for a while, leading up to the beginning of the session, and then it just kind of hit a brick wall and stopped. And so that's why a group of interest in our lower basin, with our support, went and got the bill filed. The bill basically does two things. It requires Houston to accept the buyout from us by January of next year. And it requires us to reserve a small portion of water, smaller percentage of water in the reservoir for them to buy for us in the future. So even with us taking over 100% of the project, they still get water out of it. Now, water they don't really need, but they still get water out of it, so they end up with something. Two things happened with the bill got filed. Houston immediately opposed it, which we were not surprised by, and then they suddenly found an interest in moving the Allen's Creek Reservoir project forward. They sent us a letter saying, we are ready to go. We don't know what's taking you, BRA, so long to get things going, which is hilarious to even hear. And so you can imagine how we were doubtful of their newfound interest in this project. It's just awfully coincidental that they suddenly became interested in moving it forward when a bill got filed forcing them to sell it to us. So obviously we have our doubts. In terms of that bill's path forward, Houston's a big enemy. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we're going to be able to run them over in the legislature. I'll be honest with you. They've got a large delegation, got a lot of political power, but we're trying. And we have a lot of support from industrial users in our lower basin that I think will have at least some influence on members in terms of their investment in Texas. The fact that they've invested millions, they need certainty in water, they need certainty in cost of water. So we have that on our side. The bill had a hearing this past Tuesday in the House Natural Resources Committee. I think the hearing went well for us. David testified, did a very good job of laying out why we think we need to be in control of this project and why Houston doesn't necessarily need to be the majority partner. Houston obviously shut up and opposed it, but we had a whole bunch of folks from the lower basin come and support it. What we've been told, the bill's left pending, as they tend to do, they leave it pending for a week usually before they do anything with it. And we've been told to keep talking with Houston to figure something out. I think the good news that came out of that hearing is that Houston's beginning to warm to suggestions of figuring out a way to let this thing go. I'm not saying they're there yet. I'm not saying that today they may not change their mind and say, no, we still want it. So we're going to keep talking to them. We're going to keep pushing. Hopefully by next week we'll know more about the path of the bill, trying to get it out of the House over to the Senate and just kind of see what we can do. So, and I'll finish by saying this. Success doesn't necessarily mean that a bill passes. Success can mean us coming to a deal without the need of that bill passing to allow us to move the project forward. So if the bill doesn't pass, but it keeps us talking and gets things going, that's fine as well. But we need something to happen before the end of this session that gives us certainty that this project's going to move forward. So,
Yeah, thank you. Any questions from Matt before I release it? Okay.
How many acre feet is that Allen Creek going to hold?
About 100,000 acre feet would be the firm yield of Allen's Creek.
And is it going to be deep water or it's shallow?
Maximum depth, you're looking at about 45 feet of course, it hasn't been engineered yet, but preliminary looks, that's about it. So it would, water level would fluctuate greatly because it would be primarily a water supply reservoir.
Okay, but then y'all, like TCQ or something for like Dow Chemical stuff, it makes a lot more sense to have one to use reservoirs like that. So glad they're building that, rather than trying to send it downstream with all the evaporation and saturation losses. So, but it'll provide.
It makes sense to develop that water supply further down south, yes sir,
Yes.
yes. And it provides drought protection for our other reservoirs and allows us to keep other water supplies where they are, again, for long-term drought protection and for future water supply. So we're excited about it moving forward. I think that, again, it's a roller coaster. Every day's a different story. We'll see where it goes, but we're excited that we're getting some traction and moving forward. Any more questions about anything that you've seen or you didn't see, real quick? Yeah, Jim?
It's kind of a question in the state. I think I've got to say it. On the system operation permit, when you first started that, the BRA, I think you might have still been in school. Phil was, he still smelled like jet fuel whenever he walked into the office. 16 years, somebody has to go down there and say, these types of things and these types of processes should not take 16 years to go through the process. That you know, with the pressure that we all have to provide resources for the growth of the state and keep up with what's going on, 16 years is just absolutely, do a 360 on this. I mean, we're going to list endangered species, like Tiffany said, faster than we're going to be able to do this process of just absolutely getting a permit. It's just, to me, it's unbelievable that it took that long to be able to go through the process, and I'm sort of ashamed that we all are supposed to be working together in moving this forward. And we all ultimately knew we would get here, but 16 years, I think everybody just needs to share that that's too long.
Jim, I really appreciate that comment. A year ago, we started making our rounds both in DC and in Austin, and the legislators asked us, what can we do to help you? This was the exact same conversation that we had with them. When we're developing water supplies, we can't get tied up for 16 years. So if Houston comes in tomorrow and says, okay, BRA, you can move Allen Street forward, we're going to start 404 permitting. And success will be measured on if we can get that permitted in 5 years. It's probably more like 7 years. The data will have to be submitted to them in 2 years. So we're going to work in limbo, if you will, for 5 to 7 years to figure out if the reservoir can be permitted. Meantime, there's all of this growth along the Texas coast, all throughout the entire Brazos Basin. It's going to be aided by that water, but the whole permitting process, just as Jim alluded to, is just going to take a long time. Do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
We could not agree with you more, that permit took way too long. When we visited with elected officials at the state level about it, what we've told them is you created all this money to implement state water plant projects, but none of that money matters if you can't get a permit for the project to begin with. The Senate Ag and Water Committee over the course of the interim looked at permit streamlining. We actually went and testified and said that the system operations permit is the poster child for why permitting should be streamlined, should be made faster. And the direction of TCEQ from that committee is you've got to figure out a way to begin getting permits out the door faster, or we, the legislature, are going to figure it out for you. So I think there's an effort. We'll see how quickly they can do it.
And understand that water permitting, when our permit was being considered, if you all had permits in line, you had to wait for us to get done. So if you submitted a permit 2 or 3 years ago, it waited for our system operations permit to move forward. So there was a train wreck there that had to be cleared out.
Thank you for that comment, Jim. So let's talk about going forward a little bit. Our staff is going to spend the next 30 days finalizing our budget. We will present a draft budget to our board of directors at the end of April, and then immediately turn around and start scheduling our customer meetings to talk about the budget. We'll do them just like we've done in the past. We'll have 3 meetings in 3 days. We'll have them regionally, so you won't have to travel as much. The one change that we're going to do, we're going to try to move that meeting from the middle of July to the first, somewhere early in June. We wanted to move it even earlier, but stuff with the legislative session this year is just not going to allow us to do that. And the reason we're going to do that is so that you'll have more time to look at our budget, work through any issues or challenges that you have to us, or if you wanted to, it would give you more time to review our budget if you wanted to approach our board about issues that you had with our budget. So we're trying to allow you more time to review our budget instead of just showing it to you in July and having our board consider that budget 2 weeks later. So there's a lot going on. I would ask a favor of you before lunch. We're fixing to do lunch, but this slideshow is going to be both audio and video on our webpage. I saw a lot of you taking notes. If there are any of these items, topics that we can come to your community or your civic groups or your city council or your board meetings and discuss and help explain or expand on, please reach out to us and let us do that. That's what we're here for, and we would appreciate that opportunity. So with that, we'll close. I really appreciate everybody being here. I hope you get to stay for lunch. We've got fajitas. It'll be really good, and you can get on your bracket and follow the whole